I'm Robert Saltzman. This is the 10,000 Things Zoom for February 8th, 2020. In fact, this is not February 8th, it's February 9th, and I'm recording this short introduction to explain that the first half hour or so of the meeting was lost due to internet connections problems on my end. Fortunately, the bulk of the meeting did get recorded, and that's what we'll be watching today. My guest today is Judy Cohen, and we join the meeting where Judy has just been discussing her interview on Batgap with Rick Archer. So let's continue here. You were saying that the last thing I heard you say was that you felt a little sorry for Rick because he was caught up too much mentally and not enough on the experience level. Is that the idea?
He's caught up in seeking. He's devoted his life to seeking. He's devoted his podcast to seeking. He is all about seeking. And he's all about attaining. And he's all about reaching for something other than he's got. He's all about it. And so that's what I'm a little sad for him, because that's a lifetime devoted to rejection of what you've got in favor of don't even know what exactly. That's made me sad for him. It's a hard way to live.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, he's perpetually seeking, and there's not any space there to just experience what is in this moment. Is that the idea?
Yes, although he thinks he is experiencing what there is in this moment, but what there is in this moment isn't enough for him. He's always trying to attain some other level of enlightenment, whatever that is. I don't even know what that means. And the thing is, you know, I don't mean to pick on Rick, but he certainly is a good stand-in for a wide swath of opinion about spirituality and non-duality, et cetera. A whole lot of folks that really feel that climbing this somehow ladder of enlightenment experience or consciousness, that there's a place to get to, I guess, or that you never get there, and so that you spend your whole life climbing. And I just wonder, if they got there, how would they know? What would tell them, this is it, I've arrived? How would they know?
Yeah, that's a good question, for sure. It's a very good question. I
think that.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Robert.
No, please speak.
I was going to say, I'm pretty sure we're in agreement, you and I, that there is so much mythology around the experience of enlightenment and consciousness and attainment. There is so much, you know, those memes that circulate periodically saying, you know, you're enlightened when you smile a lot for no reason, or you, nothing rattles you, things like that. There's just so much mythology that feeds the idea that this experience that we have right now, whatever it happens to be, if we were a child in a cage south of the US border, this experience, whatever it is, the idea is that it isn't good enough, and that it should be different, and that we should experience something different, and that if only we do the right things, we will experience something different. This is a hard way to live, and it's exhausting.
Yes, it is.
So a lot of times people come to, you know, people often come to me with the idea that they feel unmotivated Well, I get it. You're tired. It's seeking is exhausting.
Yes.
Climbing that ladder perpetually is exhausting.
So
So,
there is this delay that I'm experiencing on my end that makes it a bit hard to converse. But I did want to add that, yeah, there's this one aspect of feeling that one's present experience is not good enough. And that, of course, is a very sad way to live, because eventually experience ends and you never got any of it. That we call that death. And a lot of people actually repent that in their last few days or hours or minutes on earth. At the end, they say, my God, I've wasted my life, which really means I didn't experience it. The other
and
side
at the
that you're
same,
talking about, the other side of, you see, it's hard to converse because I did hear your voice there, but just to finish,
we'll do our best.
just to finish the point, you talk about the kids in cages, for example, which actually broke my heart. I ended up crying a couple of times. The idea among some of these enlightenment mavens is that even that child's supposed to be just groovy with it all, because after all, uh, this is a non-dual experience, and that's all part of it. And that may work theoretically for someone, but what it really does is just cut the heart out of compassion entirely, so that we don't feel these things. And one of my main critiques of spirituality is that it seems to put a lot of people in the place of not caring. They just don't care. And that's another way to miss your life. If you don't care about, if you're not willing to enter into the experiences of others, then you just cut yourself off entirely.
You know, I think folks think it's not cool to care. You're not supposed to care. It's not enlightened to care. And yet, I think there's a difference between, oh, it's just all great, and also, this is the experience happening now, and even the suffering in the experience is what's happening now. And so, the rejection, this is very hard to live like this. Of course, when we feel bad, when we feel that kind of bad, we don't want that to continue. Nobody wants that. And so it becomes very seductive and almost irresistible. For most of us, it's pretty much irresistible to not crave the lack of suffering, to not crave leaving where we are now and moving on. But if we were allowed to experience all of it, including the tears and the wishing it was different, and the being in a cage, and the sickness, and the true pain, at least it wouldn't be overlaid with a rejection of the present.
Yes,
So,
I agree.
and it's always kind of fascinating to me, because a lot of these folks, so I am hazy on what enlightenment actually is anyway. I mean, there's, of course, varying ideas of what it is, and there's seeing through this blissed out all the time school. And it just seems to me that if you're going for a state of experience, a state or experience, a certain kind of experience, to the rejection of all other kinds of experiences, you're going to miss out on the richness, all the, including the pain and including the tears. We're going to miss out on that if the only thing that is okay with us is happy.
Yes. If one seeks perfection of some kind, um, then one will either be deluded and find perfection, which is really a shame, or keep looking beyond what we have right in front of us to find perfection elsewhere. And in either one of those cases, what we really are and what we really have is not seen. And that's the way
And also might be perfect as it is.
you didn't hear that?
I mean, I said also might be actually perfect as it is already. I mean, the idea that, right? The idea that pain is not part of perfection, that's,
Okay.
that makes life small.
Right. At that point, then we're just dealing with what we mean by perfection. So um, I have a problem with the word perfection because um, it's possible to find perfection in the material world, like a perfect crystal, a flawless diamond, let's say, could be a perfect diamond. But I don't think it's possible to find perfection in our experiences unless we blind ourselves, obscure part of what our experience is. I mean, is it really perfect to break your back, as what has happened to me last year? I never felt it was perfect. I felt that I have to deal with it, which is not the same thing at all. I think if there had been perfection that day, there would not have been that accident. And I would have not spent the next 6 months trying to cope with operations and all this stuff. So this is a question of what you mean by perfect. And I like to keep that word out of it personally and face life with a kind of stoicism, which means that enjoy what you can when that's occurring and endure the rest. And I find just personally that in that approach, there can be happiness even in the midst of suffering. Not that the suffering, not that the events that triggers the suffering are perfect. We're not perfect. It's just that this is what we got. This is the way a cookie crumbles, and deal with it.
I think we might have stumbled on an area where you and I slightly disagree, but I think the disagreement might be semantic. I think when you talk about Stoicism and enjoying what you can and enduring the rest, it's not as if we have a whole lot of choice. That's what we all do. What else can we do? We're either enjoying it or we're enduring it. Those are the only options, really, as long as we're alive. And I guess the question for me would be, I'm just looking for the right words. Is it possible to find any beauty at all, even in pain? Or does it just have to be gritted teeth and pulled through? I mean, some of the people on this line who have worked with me before have heard me use these examples that, you know, for centuries and maybe even thousands of years, mystics and aesthetes and spiritual leaders of various kinds have deliberately inflicted pain on themselves in various ways, intentionally sought physical pain. For them, it was much more than enduring. It was welcome. So I don't know if that's a word quibble between us, Robert, or an actual legit disagreement.
Oh, well, I don't think it's a word quibble. I think we agree the view that I have, I think the view that I have on it is, where we may disagree, is you said, well, what's the option? You're either enjoying your experience or you're having to put up with it in one way or another. And you say, and there's no option, there's no alternative. But actually, there is an alternative that I see a majority of my fellow humans resorting to, which is escapism. And
Fair enough.
one of my main critiques of so-called spirituality is that it allows for almost a perfect escapism. I mean, you create this other world in the imagination that the Buddha or whoever attained, and now you are on that path, and you spend your whole life walking the path, and that is how you avoid the actual living of this moment. You're on someone else's program, and you find a teacher who teaches you his or her program, and you believe it, and now you're actually living a second-hand life. I don't know if you agree with that or not.
Well, I do. It is astonishing, regularly astonishing to me how many people hand over their A, good sense, and B, their opportunity to live a unique and colorful life. A friend of mine today sent me a copy of a Facebook post in a group I am not in. I have blocked the person who runs this group. And so I'm not in the group. And the post that he sent me was this poor guy saying, I've tried doing this inquiry over and over and over. I am doing it right. I am still stuck in whatever the situation is. I can't get out. What am I doing wrong? So this poster has handed over his ability to see this inquiry is not working for him. It's not working. You can do it and do it and do it. It's not working. But he has handed over common sense even. You know, that old French saying, the definition of crazy is to keep doing something, expecting different results, doing the same thing, expecting different. I'm mangling it. This is what happens with quotes in my hands. They get mangled. But it's just, you know, at some point, can this imperfect character with this imperfect history and this wackadoo story, this imperfect being who gets triggered by whatever and loves some things and doesn't like other things, and can this be enough as a unique experience, one of 8 billion? We don't need replicas of these teachers.
Yes, exactly. And so there you use the word imperfect in the sense that I intended it before when we were talking about perfection. This imperfect being. No one can just define myself as perfect. Everything's perfect, you know. Everything happens for a reason. People say that too, and which is, in my view, total nonsense.
Yeah, like what's making the plan?
Say that again?
I said, I agree with you, because what is making the plan? Everything happens for a reason.
Oh, I see.
What being's reason?
Yeah.
What is doing this? If there's a reason, like what's plan are we following?
Well, okay, so now we're willing to say, myself has plenty of hang-ups, just like all human beings. We're basically animals with a bit more prefrontal cortex than our primate relatives, but we don't really have the equipment to figure all this stuff out, and we're filled with cravings, sexual cravings, the need to be self-defensive and aggressive, the wanting to attain and achieve things that we wish we had and don't. And these plague all of us. And my point is that logging on, signing on to some spiritual system is not the way to deal with that, not at all. It will be escapism. You'll be imagining a better myself, but we human beings don't get to that. All of us, I say, even the great heroes, they still had their troubles. They still had their fears. They still had all of their feelings. That's my take on it. Although someone could say, no, that's
No, I agree.
you agree with that.
No, I totally agree. And, you know, I'm thinking about all the folks that dismiss, let's say, Alan Watts because he still drank or because he liked sex or he took drugs. So they dismiss him because he was an imperfect human being, as again, but this is part of the mythology of this Enlightenment story, that you're going to achieve a place, attain a place in your life where you have none of those foibles and quirks and desires. And and when you think about the fact, if you look back, and I'm hardly a scholar by any means, but with what little I know and from what I've seen other folks say, if you look back at all of these various saints, look back at Nisargadatta, look back at Krishnamurti, they were all flawed. They, except for possibly Ramana, and let's give them Ramana for a minute. One out of how many billions? And I don't even know that this is true because I have read otherwise, but let's say it is true. One out of how many billions? This is not attainable to eliminate our humanity by reaching this exalted state. It is not attainable. And what I was trying to say to Rick Archer that day was the attempt to attain this unattainable state has become in itself a cause of depression for people. So it becomes one more layer where they're not enough, they have failed, they haven't got it, they're doing something wrong, and it becomes one more layer of imperfection. And it just doesn't seem fair when life is hard enough.
So Judy, someone comes to you in that condition, where they're constantly judging himself or herself against some imagined spiritual master who's transcended all of this humanity. How would you deal with that on a therapeutic level?
So after the Rick Archer interview, I got emails by the hundreds of people that didn't have the guts to say this online because the spiritual know-it-alls are quite the bully sometimes. So these were people that didn't necessarily post online, but this is what they were writing me about. I'm not getting it. What's wrong with me? And it's very hard for me. So I'm hesitating for two reasons. One, the main reason is, I'm going to answer your question. The main reason I am going to be careful about how I answer this question is that what I do, I enter the mind through the language that I'm hearing from you, from the words that people are using, and also through their circumstances in life. What is happening in your life? I use the everyday as my doorway in. And I want to be careful how I answer this because I trick the mind and I don't want to tell it what my tricks are because then they won't work. That being said, generally what I do with people who come to me saying, I'm so unhappy with myself. What am I doing wrong? I haven't achieved enlightenment. I'm not there yet. I've tried everything. I've gone to India. I've sat in Ramana's cave, for God's sakes. As if the walls of this cave have some kind of magic. Anyway, what I will generally do is some version of what's not okay with you as you are? Why isn't as you are enough? And B, how do you know this is a problem? Just notice what you are depending on to know you haven't gotten there, you don't have it, you're not enough. What are you depending on? How do you know this? You know this through thought. That's the only way you can know it. Thought is unreliable. So I guess the first question would be, how do you know you have a problem? And what's not okay with you as you are? That would be probably my entry, something like that.
Okay, so you're speaking in general, I understand, because you don't want to give away any of the judo moves that you will throw at me when I come to you complaining about still trying to transcend myself and I just can't do it.
Well, you know, here's the other thing about trying to transcend the self. Notice what tools we need to use to do that. We need the mind. We can't be out of the mind. We are contained. We have to work with the brain. Without the brain, we're in a coma. So what tools do we use to transcend? We use the mind. We use, what we call consciousness, but is still happening and experienced within these brains. We can't escape these brains. And so, what are the odds that the mind wants to be transcended? Why would it want that? It doesn't. It likes things just the way they are.
Well,
so
go ahead, sorry.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
I think the idea of transcendence is that people find themselves unhappy and they think that something is holding them back from being happy.
Right.
And for one person, it might be if they could ever get a Ferrari and a blonde girlfriend, that would make them happy, and they pursue those goals and eventually may end up with a Ferrari and a blonde girlfriend, maybe. And that either makes them happy or doesn't. That remains to be seen. I think what happens in this idea of transcendence in the spiritual world is that we've made gods out of ordinary people who have found a kind of, happiness is not the right word, let's say contentment in being, in just being here. Whether I'm flat on my back with a broken back, I was in that condition, and there were moments of joy and many moments of contentment mixed in with the pain and suffering. And the thing that made that possible for me is that I wasn't ever feeling, why does this happen to me? Or what did I do wrong? Or maybe it's just my karma. All of this nonsense that is what you were calling thought that just plagues us. And I think what happens, you were talking about enlightenment. I would never call myself enlightened, but I do call myself awake. And what I mean by awake is that I realize this is it. Whatever I think is part of this moment, but it can't replace this moment. This moment is a lot more than just what I think about it, a lot more. And as you pointed out, there's 8 billion people on this planet right now. And what happens to Robert one way or another doesn't really amount to much in the face of that. And if we could only see that, if we could only see that for one moment, a lot of this striving would come to an end immediately, and we'd just be grateful for what we have. I'm grateful for what I have. It's as simple as that. And it may not be much, but I've got a safe bed to sleep in. I've got clean water to drink. I have food. I have friends. I have a beautiful woman who loves me. What more could someone ask for? Well, a lot. The Ferrari and the blonde girlfriend, and that's where we go wrong. And if the Ferrari and the blonde girlfriend is some spiritual attainment, that doesn't change it. It's the exact same movement. It's just the object is different. That's the way I see it, Judy.
I have found that when people are, I think this is an Alan Watts quote, somebody said this, that when you seek happiness, you are going to find unhappiness, something like that. And in general, I think that we have made a god of happiness as if it is a requirement, and as if we're doing something wrong if we don't get it, and as if what we have instead of happiness is not okay or good enough. We've made happiness a requirement, and that has made us unhappy with what we've got. When you said you could be thinking, why is this happening to me? What did I do wrong? I understand you weren't thinking that, but you were using those as examples. So those would be examples of how I would use the words coming at me when I'm working with somebody. For instance, why does this happen to me? What did I do wrong? How did I bring this about? Some version of how did I make this happen is very, very common. This is my fault. I did something wrong. Some version of that. What did I do to make this happen? And where I would enter with all of that is to help people begin to notice all of the referencing of self involved in those questions. What did I do wrong? How did I make this happen? Why is this happening to me? Why am I feeling this? What did I do to make myself hurt like this? What did they do to make me hurt like this? I was pointing out to somebody recently, somebody who had a death in the family, and she was saying things like, I feel very bad because I could have done more. And regardless of whether that's true, noticing that this person's pain about this death was not about the death. The pain was about herself.
Oh, what a great point.
Or what she did or didn't.
Excuse me for interrupting, but I have to underline that last point. That's just terrific. I love hearing that. It's not about the death, it's about my fuck up, is basically what you're saying. And
right.
Go ahead.
Years ago, I had a client who was, I remember this lady very, very well because my mother was a twin. My mother just died a couple months ago. My mother's a twin. She was the same age as this lady. This lady came to me. She was also a twin. She was 84 at the time. And while we were working together, her twin died. And of course, she was so upset, of course. You know, they'd been together since the womb. And, but what this woman kept saying to me was, yes, thank you, Lena. She did say, why did this not happen to me? But what she also said was, who will I eat dinner with? Who will I talk to? Who will I spend my time with? Who will love me? All of those things were me, me, me. What will become of me? And so the language, as people talk, is so clearly self-referential all the time. It is self-conscious. How am I doing? How am I doing? How am I doing? As if we could, if we take our eyes off this self for half a second, all hell breaks loose. We just cannot afford it. So whether it's death or depression or getting fired from work or a political situation or not doing enough for the polar bears, so much of it comes down to what am I doing or not doing, and what do I need to do to make things better? And it becomes all about the me. And for people who want to be enlightened and who want to see through the self, that language can begin to show them how the sense of self is held in place by these constant checkings. How am I doing? If I'm going to check, how is my pen doing over and over and over, that tells me there is a pen. When I check on me, how am I doing? Did I do things right? Did I do enough for my loved one? What will become of me? That tells me there is a me. All that language says there's a me. And that's what it's for. And so that self-involvement that comes out of having made a God of happiness, I deserve happiness. And if I don't have happiness, I'm doing something wrong, holds the self in place. If you want to transcend the self, you can't do it with that kind of language.
Well, that's just brilliant. Thank you very much. I'm afraid we agree on a lot, and so we won't really, we're not going to have any. I've had some, I've had some controversial conversations, but this won't be one of them, apparently. I think I approach that same situation in a little different way, which is what I would, what you are doing is pointing out that centering on the self is not the way to be content. It just
Right.
it just
Right.
it just destroys any actual enjoyment of this moment if you're constantly checking, as you pointed out. And I agree with that. What I try to do in my own work is express the feeling that I have that the sense of self is really ephemeral and it's changing in each second. And so there really is no self in the sense that people evoke when they say I or me. There's a mistaken understanding that I and me actually refer to some fixed presence that suffers. But really, the suffering and the sense of self are all one and the same thing. They can't be separated. It's not like I'm having bad luck. This is what's going on. And the sense of I-ness or myselfness just arises in each moment. And if that is seen, that we see how quickly it dies and is replaced, well, that's what I mean by awake. So.
Agreed. Agreed. Well, I was going to say, my work, which is what you've been asking about, I deal with people of varying levels of understanding what we're talking about here. For instance, I have one client who's 11 years old, and I'm not going to get into any of this with him, of course. And yet, it's possible to enter anyway, just in disguise. But this sense of self that, people talk about being your true self and being true to yourself and being your authentic self without even describing what the hell that is. I mean, is my authentic self only nice Judy? Is it not the Judy that would have, if not having been on recorded for all time, have said very different things to Rick Archer? Is it only pleasant, loving, compassionate, Judy? Is it not triggered, Judy? So, this sense of I-ness that you refer to, it is so variable, it is so wispy, it blows in the wind based on context. You could try and solidify it, and of course most of us do, but I think that the pain that results from this, and the sense that something's not right, and the desire for something else, comes out of our inherent knowledge that this is not right, and we feel the lie of it. We feel it. And I think that's what we're calling not authentic. We know we're not this. We know it. Our language says so all the time. You're not acting like yourself. What kind of expression is that?
Yes, actually.
You're telling me your story. Sorry, Robert, go ahead.
No, well, I'm sorry about this delay here. So we've agreed again. So I wonder at this point, we should open the meeting to from others. Would that be okay with you?
Absolutely.
Okay, if you'd like to speak, just raise your hand, please. And we'll do it that way. If I can figure out how to know when someone is raising her hand or his hand.
Or just ask a question. Looks like there's a lot of chats here. Let's.
Oh, I see David Matt. Okay. David Matt, you are on.
Okay, good to see both of you. Judy just mentioned something about working with the 11-year-old, and I was just curious about how, if you do have a young relative and you're interested in getting them thinking about some of these things. Judy, do you have any thoughts on that?
I would say, first of all, you can never go wrong by asking questions. We talk at people all the time. And for instance, a lot of these spiritual teachers, et cetera, there's a whole lot of talking at. None of them are ever asking questions. So I would ask him questions. And I would also, because I'm going to use my little client as an example. Okay, I don't know who you're referring to specifically, David. So I'll just let you apply whatever fits, and you'll just fill me in if you want me to go in some other direction. This particular client of mine is anxious at 11, and and that's not unusual. So by 11, it's already, it's already set. All that, you're doing this wrong, bad, you better know what you're doing. That's already set. It helps to have him tell you, if he's willing, what he's hearing in his head. Blah, 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 failure, blah, blah, loser, blah, blah, not good enough. It helps to know what he is hearing. And I think it helps for him to understand that when he goes out into the world, again, if I'm off course with what you're asking about, you tell me, okay? For my little client, he thinks he's the only one. He thinks in his class he's the only one who's anxious. He thinks he's the only one who's watching himself with disapproval. And so anything that can show him that just like he pretends that he's fine in public, they're pretending too. And so it could be that they're all just like each other and nobody's letting on. So maybe he's not so special in that bad way.
I like that. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I'd really like to thank you and whoever thought of getting you, Robert, if I may call you Robert, and Judy together. Thank you very, very much. For me, I find myself in a grayish area. Yesterday, I ventured into a group that is called, excuse my French, it's really called this, and it doesn't mean, what the fuck are the principles? Now, I am not decided to not be active in that group because I find that they are discussing spirituality and being airy-fairy and seeking what you were just so beautifully articulated. Something that in my mind is absolutely impossible. But I find myself bubbling up with a certain sort of passion, and I want to say something, but unless, and I don't know where I'm going with this, but I want to say something in this group because I find that there are 2,500 members in this group, and I find that they are perpetuating more hardship in the sense that we don't realize that some of us who are seeking, inadvertently perpetuate this to the people who think that it's actually attainable. And I find myself wanting to say, listen, would you just get a grip? I don't know what to do with that, Judy. So
here's what I would say, Diane.
mm-hmm.
Because first of all, I'm in a whole bunch of these spiritual groups. People add me all the time. I don't even realize I've been added sometimes till I suddenly see some post that I would have nothing to do with in my life suddenly pass along. So I'm in a lot of these, and I do see those, all the kinds of stuff you're talking about. I see them all the time. What would guide me in that situation is if you're feeling a passion to speak, then speak, because you're driven to do it. You know, when I see this stuff, most of the time I don't post, I don't comment, because I don't need to change their minds. And I don't need them to understand me either. And I also don't need them to know my point of view or whether it's correct or not. That being said, every once in a while, I just find myself typing in those things. So if you find your fingers start moving, type your answer. As long as you know you're not likely to change any minds, you're not likely to be heard or even understood, because people are hearing and seeing. We're all doing this all the time. We're hearing and seeing the world through our own filters. Anything that doesn't fit is excluded, and that's going to be the case. So let your fingers guide you. If they want to type, let them type, but don't expect anything from it.
Bravo. Bravo. It's pretty simple to notice that when something brings you down, it's because you're engaged with it. I'm not saying that's wrong. I mean, if you want to get engaged in pain and suffering, I certainly do. Not personally only, but I was a therapist for 20 years and heard a lot of pain and suffering hour after hour, frankly, in a small room
Right.
with another person.
Right.
And I used to.
I do.
Go
Sorry,
ahead.
Robert, go ahead.
I
I do find that the urge for someone to hear my point of view, I want them to know what I think, and I want them to take in what I think. That urge is so strong. And ideally, we would have them agree with us. So A, they hear, and B, they agree. And, you know, you only have to look at the American political scene right now, and I'm gathering by what I read on social media, et cetera, that this is not just in America. The ferocity with which people come at each other, trying to say, I'm right, my filters are the right ones, I've got this down, and you need to hear me and know that I am right. And it just becomes, you know, one wall talking to another one. And it's certainly like that in the spiritual world too. And that's why, you know, I don't post anything on Rick Archer's forum. There is really no point. And if I felt that I had to do it anyway, I would do it. But it is much more peaceful for me to see those times when I really crave being acknowledged as a self. Let me put myself out there. You know, and once I see that that's really a verification of this Judy thing, it really generally stops being necessary to say anything. And then sometimes the fingers type.
Well, that's what got the bravo. That understanding that you're just human, and even though you're not on an ego trip, I see that about you. It's beautiful, but you have an ego. We all do, and there are times when, just like you might need sex, there's times when you just need someone to approve of you. I mean, that could really just be a human thing, to be part of the tribe and understand that they'll keep feeding you, even if you do break your back or whatever it is. See, that's big. We are animals who evolved to live in small bands, and that's what we're all doing. And so this fracturing of the political spectrum that you mentioned is just part of that. It was unfeasible when the world got so connected up for people to live in these small groups anymore. That's destroyed. Everyone's got a phone, everybody's got social media on there, and that's where you go for some of your kicks. Whereas you would have had to actually be in the room with Robert and look into Robert's eyes, and Robert would be looking into your eyes.
Right. That's
over. It's dead. And that really came to my understanding last December. We had a gathering down here of some of my readers. I see them over here now. I see Mike Block. Hi, Mike. And I understood that all the writing that I had done, which is a lot, yes, had engaged these people's interest, but we never really had the mutual understanding until we met in the same space and could feel each other's presence on the animal level. We're losing this, and we think that just what's on a page or on a screen is reality, and it isn't. It just isn't. I mean, it's a reality in the sense that it's here, but it's not a stand-in for our human needs for membership. So in the course of this 10 days, I got to speak a lot, on, and a lot of very respectful people listening and asking really great questions. It's beautiful. For me, a beautiful experience. Well, there were a couple of people there who were more skeptical than most, which is fine. I'm skeptic myself by nature, so I totally dig that. On one of the breaks, she came over to me and said, all this adulation must feel really nice to you. And I immediately replied right off the top of my head, I don't care about adulation. What is feeling good to me is that I'm relevant. Now, my point here, I've gone on, I know, but my point here is that even though I had transcended the need for adulation. Actually didn't transcend it. I'm kind of disgusted by it. But I still had a need. And the need was, I'm relevant. I write books and people read them or whatever the thing is. Or if it's Judy, you have a client and help that person to feel differently, you're relevant. And I think what we need to understand, in my view, is to stop climbing this ladder to transcendence and perfectionism, and instead just really do what we can as humans, which is a lot. We have this intelligence, and I don't think it's enough to figure out the metaphysics of reality. I don't think we have that intelligence, but we have enough intelligence to somehow, I hope, work out this tribalism thing that has got the world in this state of upset all over the planet now. People are breaking into these small groups, and I don't want to be part of that. Well, I've gone on and on. What would you say?
Oh, it's quite all right. I would say a few things in answer to that.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, when I feel like somebody is attempting adulation in my direction,
Mm-hmm.
I do anything I can to cut that off at the knees, because I don't want to be put in that position. I don't want to have to live up to somebody else's fantasy. I'm not interested in putting that on me. And so, I'll just put an end to that as best I can right away. Of course, that does hurt my pocketbook. But that's how it goes. I just can't handle it. There's a thing, I think, this might be an area that we diverge, Robert. I see the tribalism as people defending and protecting their sense of self. This is the right way to be. This is who I am. I am the right way to be. And I see even the idea of being relevant is, in a sense, a way to verify this me as here and needed and validated. And I think I understand that it feels there's a strong pull towards that. But I think once we can see we're not relevant, and never will be, never have been.
Yeah, let me interrupt you at that point. That I think there may be a misunderstanding, not that we disagree. That was my point.
Okay.
I'm saying the same thing, but the point I was trying to make there is that we're all human. So even
Right.
someone who says I'm awake and is now conducting this meeting that went on for 10 days, even in the midst of that, although saying I don't want adulation, I really don't, but I still felt a need to be relevant at that point, and that was okay too. It's not that you have to get over that, is what I was trying to say.
Absolutely.
But what you started out with, I thought was beautiful, because I agree with that 100%, and that is that you don't want to be the object of someone's fantasy, because that takes away your freedom. Judy.
Yes, and at least leave me the privilege to create my own story. I am a story, you are a story, fine. Let me make my own. Don't be sticking yours on me. So that's my feeling about that. It's people do it, I guess. but it's heavy. I don't know how somebody, let's say like Byron Katie, I don't know how she stands it. All that adulation, all that reverence, all the people running around quoting her word for word. I know I had some friends from back when I was involved in that who never said an original word. Everything they said was some quote. Literally, I'm not exaggerating. Never said a word that wasn't a Byron Katie phrase. I don't know how she lives with that level of reverence. That's too heavy for me.
Well, you said that you shrug it off as soon as someone tries to paint you with it.
I do.
Okay.
I do. She doesn't. She doesn't.
Well,
And
so,
I don't know.
exactly. So that's what we're discussing here. Actually, my friend Kirsten, who is probably here, I can't really see everyone, mentioned that you and I, in her experience, had that in common, that we didn't want anyone laying that kind of trip on us at all. So
Right.
and she urged me to bring it up with you, which I've just done, and I really like what you're saying. Could you say a little more about that? What do you do when?
Yes. Well, I write them and I say, stop it. I literally, that's what I do. I write them and I say, you're trying to make me something I'm not. Don't do that. And I have, I'm assuming, I could be wrong, there is an extra component to this for me as a female that perhaps you don't experience, where I get written by men. Men write me, taking this kind of reverence or adulation up a notch to make it romantic. These are people who've never met me, never spoken to me. They know nothing about me. For all they know, when I'm not working or I'm not posting on Facebook, I'm not crawling into a small closet and killing small animals. They know nothing about me. And yet they have created this persona for me. No, just stop it. And if they won't stop it, I have to block them, because again, I understand that we are story, but let me make my own, please.
Yeah, well, I totally understand that. And even though I know I'm very old and beat up looking, women still like me, and I get that.
Of course you do. And your wife, oh my gosh, she's gorgeous. So I mean, yeah.
Which one is worth it all? So I get that. Objectification. It's different for men than it is for women in general, because men don't really get raped a lot by women. It's unusual. So there is a real difference there. If some woman objectifies me, it doesn't bring in any real feeling of being intruded on, which I gather you do feel that way. So we might be different.
I just don't want to encourage I'm not afraid of being raped, and I'm not even feeling that intruded upon. It's just that I really don't want the responsibility for their, let me say this another way. When I stumbled on all this spiritual stuff, I was big into making fun of it a lot. And I fell from that into an adoration for Byron Katie. I was one of those drink the Kool-Aid people. I was absolutely one of them, and I would still be if it had been up to me at the time. And then I went from there to another situation where I was idealizing a human being as a teacher. And when I fell, when I, as the one idealizing them, began to realize they were not my ideal, I was crushed. I was depressed. I was bereft of my dream. It was very hard for me. I don't want to be responsible for that. Don't put me on a pedestal, because if I fall off, you're going to be sad. I don't want to be responsible for that.
That's really beautiful, Judy. That is super. I feel the same way. I do a lot of writing because I'm interested, I guess, in philosophical understanding of life, not a spiritual one necessarily, but a philosophical one. And I have done that for years through Socratic dialogue, which is a kind of debate, but I want it not to be a debate, but a dialogue, which is different. When I do that, but sometimes there's people who are just unruly and disrespectful, and I have to block them. That's true.
You know, and I think that's some of that comes from the freedom of sitting in one's own home and typing without a real sense of, it's like road rage. We forget there's a human in the car. We get mad at the car. You know, if the car cuts us off, we get mad at the car. And then when we drive by to get a look at who did that, you know, that glare that you give to the car that cuts you off. I think that there's a freedom to be meaner somehow when we're not face to face, and people are enjoying their freedoms. So
I'm sorry, I missed the last sentence or two. I was trying to figure out the tech end of this thing. Could you repeat?
okay, I just said I think there's a freedom to be meaner when we're typing into our computers as opposed to being face to face. We have more freedom to be unkind.
Undoubtedly. I mean, I always feel that way.
Yeah.
Online when people lose civility. I always feel you wouldn't be doing this if we were in the same room and you were really looking into my eyes. You would not.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I know that. I was thinking about the other end of it. You were talking about not being idealized. What I find is that I've done a lot of writing now, and at first I used to get a lot of pushback and disagreement, and I still do get some of that. But I'm in a lot of these groups without ever having chosen to. People add me to it. And then I find out that I'm being quoted in these groups, but there's no attribution of the quotation. And people are just speaking with the exact same, I mean, ideas are one thing, but when they're using the exact same phraseology, then I feel that I am being idealized and don't know exactly how to bring that to a stop. I keep telling people don't do it, but you know, I can't throw a bomb at them or whatever. How do you see that?
And yes, it is tricky to deal with. I actually, at the moment, have blocked the entire country of Australia from my website because one person, according to Google Analytics, is spending hours on there lifting things, and there's no way to just block one IP address. So yeah, I had to resort to that.
Okay, well, just to be clear, I don't mind being ripped off at this point. I mean, I'm an old man now. I'm just sharing the last few gleanings from this beautiful life, for which I am grateful. So that's my intention. So I understand it's different for you. You're a lot younger and all that, and you're in the midst of a career, and it's beautiful. I like what you.
I don't know if I'm a lot younger. That would be fun to figure out. But I don't mind if people help themselves to whatever it is I'm offering. I don't want to be lied to, and this was a difficult situation. So hopefully I will be able to set free the country of Australia sometime soon. So I thought I saw a hand.
Dave Zuckerman, nice to meet you. Sorry to hear about your mom.
Thank you.
And, you know, I think one of the things that took me about the Archer conversation, and the same thing with Robert as well, too, was the mention of the present moment throws everybody for a loop, because to be in your presence is very difficult for most people. And, you know, Robert and you both attack it in similar ways, And, you know, I attack it in a very direct way with people, with the things that I do. And it really confounds everybody. And I believe that you and Robert both confounded them. But you talked about imperfection. And one of the things I'm really great at finding people's faults. It's a professional thing that I've done for years. And one of the things is I enjoy it. It started out with realizing that Walt Disney was an imperfect man who was addicted to drugs, yet he was very creative, and I admire his characters. I wear his watches. I love the Disney animation stuff. I love it. Byron Katie was an alcoholic. She was a drug addict and amphetamine freak. She'd been to rehab a couple of times, and this is her story, her words. And she had a very tough time. She went to rehab, and she had a spiritual experience in the middle of at a lockdown rehab. And from that, she took the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and retooled it to the work. And then she got together with Eckhart Tolle. And I'm not criticizing here. I'm just stating what's known facts that she shared and some things that I know. And she got together with Eckhart Tolle, and then she kind of idolized Tolle a bit, and then went off and did her thing in Ojai and built her stuff. And I was actually surprised that you had done that, but I accept it for what it was. But I'm really interested in what turned the corner when you realized all of a sudden yourself, instead of, because we've also been talking here about projecting into idealization and stopping people dead in their tracks from locking onto you, because that's something that does happen. Robert has that all the time, and I know that you get it too. So my question is kind of like this. Everybody, we're all human, we're all imperfect, we all have our foibles and faults, and I think that imperfection is what makes things so colorful and nice. And my question is, at what point with Byron Katie, when you were actually working for her, did you realize and make that jump? And then you said you jumped to another idol. And what idol was that? And what made you finally realize your own presence in this moment?
So I'll just start with the second question first. The place that I jumped, I don't even want to mention, I don't want to give enough credit to that place to even say the words. I'm not going to say the name. I didn't leave Byron Katie willingly. I would never have left. But somebody, I don't want to get too deeply into this story. Somebody told her something about me and she believed it. And in the course of discovering that Byron Katie actually believes her thoughts, the walls came tumbling down. Seeing that she believed her thoughts took it all away from me in an instant, because that's her whole premise. I have thoughts like everybody else, I just don't believe them. Not true. So this was devastating for me. And at the time, it took everything from me. It took my income, it took my friends, they were afraid to speak to me. It took my community, it took everything.
So you were excommunicated.
I could have been communicated again, but by then I didn't want to go back. You know, it wasn't supposed to be permanent. It was supposed to be 6 months.
So basically what happened was she believed something about you and she became imperfect on that, and it devastated you and shocked you into
it's
the
seeing
moment.
that she was human, to accept it. I had seen other evidence of humanity in her, and like everybody else, I had pushed it away and ignored it. It's there, but I was ignoring it, and I was given no choice. But I was given no choice, which was the big blessing for me. Huge blessing. Not that you could have told me that was a blessing at the time. I was so close to suicide, it was crazy.
Why?
Well, because everything vanished on me in a heartbeat. And, you know, talk about identifying as a self, everything I knew me to be had been taken, and I didn't know what I was left with. So, yes, I was very, very close. I've told some people this before, but so I was talking to a friend at that time, and she said, Judy, you need to call 911. And I said, why would I do that? I would only do that if I want to live. Just, that makes no sense. So I was, yeah. But the urge to, this was before I understood quite a bit about all of this, the urge to be, to have this self verified in a way I liked was very strong. And I wanted to be verified, and that wasn't coming. And so what I was left with was a clean slate. And then that was pretty interesting. Painful. It's not necessarily comfortable to lose your sense of self and everything you know yourself to be. That's not necessarily a good time. But for me, incredibly valuable. So when I left that world, I was looking for another I could find that I could just slide into. And I found one for a little while, and then thankfully came to my senses.
But how did you come? So the next person you went to, you really slipped into the same thing. But what snapped you at that point when you realized your own presence in the moment?
That person also let me down. Well, this is why I will not, as best I can, let anybody else idealize me, because being disappointed in them later is so painful. I just don't want to feed that for anybody. So yes, that person's humanity was very clear to me also. And, you know, again, these are great gifts for me, painful as they were.
So, Judy, I was hearing that you don't want to be idealized because the aftermath, the disappointment is so painful. Do you mean you're disappointed, or the person who is idealizing you is disappointed and you don't want to make them feel that?
When I was idealizing, let's say Byron Katie, and then I began to see her humanity, that was painful for me as a person who was idealizing her. Now, when people try to put me in that position that I put her in, I don't want to do it because I know what's coming for them.
Right. So
I don't.
So you deal with this by showing them your humanity, or that I think that was David's question that he was going to get to. At least it's my question.
That's part of it. Honestly, I never hide it. I am brusque. I am direct. I insult people all the time. I have little tolerance for fools. I am ferocious. I am, as you can see, I'm not one of these, you know, don't show any emotion, don't be too energetic. I'm not one of these. I don't hide this at all. And so of course I'm not everybody's cup of tea. That's okay. But so yes, part of it is I don't withhold my humanity and my flaws. When I was dealing with my mother's sickness this last year, there were many times where even though I knew she was sick and couldn't help it, she triggered me. I was triggered. And I yelled at her. I didn't hide that from people. So I'm not masking my humanity as best I can. Best I can. I mean, we're all trained in presenting a face to the world, presenting these selves in some way. But the other way, so that the other way is that I flat out tell these people, don't idealize me, just stop it.
So not
It may or may.
surprising that we have all these friends in common. We have almost 1,000 Facebook friends in common, because
Which is wild.
I think we agree on everything, frankly. I, I'm not afraid to be seen as human. I'm demanding to be seen as human, really. And
You know, because Robert, what's what's the alternative? I mean, I wrote one of my little mind ticklers, one of my newsletters about this some time back. What's the alternative if we are going to eliminate all the little quirks and the personality, what we call flaws, and the rough edges and the boisterousness instead of the calm, blissed out spiritual attitude? If we're going to eliminate all that, what are we left with? We're left with Stepford. We're left with, and I'm referencing a movie there for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about. It's the Stepford Wives, where a bunch of husbands in a rich town got together and made robots of their wives, basically. So we're left with, if we eliminate humanity, we're left with Stepford or plastic. That's the only alternative.
Stepford Wives is a great film,
And really a great example for all of us living our lives, trying to polish these selves and make them better and make them more acceptable and quieter, or speak up more, or have more love, or whatever. But all of this effort, constant effort to improve this self, which isn't even real to begin with. And if we were so unfortunate as to be successful, what would we have? We would have Stepford.
Beautiful point. So this self-improvement project can become one's favorite escape, hypnotic trance. And people, it can take place in regard to some metaphysical idea of transcendence or whatever, or it could be, I'm going to lose 10 pounds. I mean, and then someone can be obsessed with that. And meanwhile, the actual life of the heart and mind is continuing, but just unconsciously. And so when I talk about being awake, I mean to be in touch with one's heart, mind, while going through all the Sturm and Drang, not after you've improved enough so that now you deserve to have peace. If you approach it that way, that it will never happen.
No, and that concept that you have to earn peace and that you have to deserve peace, I mean, just taken on its own is a very sad notion. As if we start out undeserving and we have to learn to earn it. No other species is afflicted with that little bit of nuts. It's just awful.
Yeah, so I say you have every right to be here like any other living thing, a tree or the Pacific Ocean. You have every right to be here. And then the other side of it,
as you are,
there is no fixed you in that sense. So what that really means is enjoy this presence. It's all we can do. I mean, you can either do away with
as best you can.
You were talking before of suicide. That was a beautiful and very honest confession. And there's a lot of credibility there in being willing to say that. But what else can we do? I mean, you either decide I can't stand this anymore and you kill yourself, or you come to terms with being human, including one's disappointment and all the rest, which I say doesn't need to be covered up or forgotten or improved upon.
Right.
That's the nuts and bolts of your life. In that pile of shit, there actually are golden nuggets. And that's what we have. Our material is what I'm saying. It doesn't have someone else's imaginary material of Jesus, heaven, or whatever it is. We have our own mind. Each one of us has a mind, and each mind is a universe of it can go almost anywhere.
It can, and it does, and each mind is a little bit crazy, and that's half the fun. That's the fun.
That's
so
right.
They're not identical.
We're all impaired and twisted, am I right?
because the mind is crazy. Thought is nuts. And the idea that we are a self, we start from a premise, again, no other species is afflicted with. And, but that's, I think for me, this is where some of the spiritual folks also miss it, at least in my opinion, is, well, here, this is it. Well, this is it means the shit too.
So whales and maybe some other cetaceans may be self-conscious the way we are. We would never know that because they have it made in a way that we don't. They don't need to make anything. They just swim around eating whenever they feel like it and having sex, basically, singing a lot. We don't get to do that. We have to work for a living in our...
We live in this crazy world. It's
Yeah.
not going to go away or stop.
Maybe for a whale, it's just fun. They're self-conscious and they think, wow, being a whale is groovy.
And interestingly, for so many other species, when they're not burdened with all of these shoulds and shouldn'ts and fix this and this is bad and all that stuff, there's numerous studies and reports, etc., of whales, for instance, doing acts of kindness, protecting a seal from orcas circling, things like that. There's constant reports of so many species where, without being laden down by all of the deserving stuff and the self stuff, these creatures are kind, unless they're hungry.
Well, we don't really know what they feel. At best, we can...
Yeah, but they act in ways that we would call kind. We don't know anything about their experience.
Yeah, they may be just playing, as you say. That's kind of what we're doing here. The way I regard this, you and I are like these two birds chirping on the wire, and we have an audience, and now they're going to chirp, I hope, which I will now invite questions from the assembled people. Please hold up your hand if you'd like to speak.
Hi. Before you say something, I just want to say, so there is one person on this call who I know from my dance life, and it's so fun to have that mix. So hi, sweetie, I love it. So anyway, carry on.
Well, maybe invite her to speak next. That'd be great to hear.
If she wants, I wouldn't want to put her on the spot, but there's a mixing of my worlds happening at the moment, and that's very fun for me. So
okay. Well,
anyway,
was there a hand up?
So somebody was about to ask a question.
Yeah.
Sorry, Robert?
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, this is a question. Robert, first, thank you so much for spending some time with us. I have a question for you, if I may, about time. Time, the way we perceive it, doesn't seem possible. I was just wondering your take on that. I can say more if you want.
Are you asking Robert?
Yeah, if I may.
Sure. Hit it.
So, when I look at time, the way we perceive it, it doesn't seem possible to be the way we perceive it. Because the way we perceive it, it would either need to have a beginning or not have a beginning, either of which is unfathomable. So, is time accurate the way we perceive it?
Okay, so the way I understand that question, is time a human experience that we create, or is there really time? Is that the question?
Yes.
Okay. Einstein was the greatest authority on time in the 20th century. He explored it mathematically, which is, I am not really fluent mathematically, only to a very small extent, but in the higher realms of mathematics, the mathematicians, they are discussing things which cannot be discussed in words. which is very interesting. It's another language, but it's not another language in the sense that Spanish is different from English. It's another language that can express things that words cannot express. And it's very complicated to learn that language and be very fluent in it. So Einstein was the head of the pack on time. And what he said is, an hour spent reading a boring book passes very slowly, but an hour spent beside a beautiful woman passes almost instantly. And that's what I mean, he said, by relativity. So the point there is that we're projecting this world. Not that there isn't a world, there is a world, but we see that world as through a glass darkly or through a filter. And the filter is our fixed ideas, our past associations, and all the rest of it, our own DNA, our upbringing, all the experiences we've ever had. And in the self-improvement approach, the idea is to clean all that up, and then you'll see things more as they are. And I don't think that's true. It's very engaging to imagine that one can do that. But so much of what we feel and think is unconscious. And the parts that we least want to know about are the most unconscious. So for me, I would say just get off that project and allow this self-expression to happen in this moment. And then you will feel alive and you won't be seeking. You'll just be expressing, which is entirely different. That's my approach to this. What would you say, Judy?
I would use different language, probably ending up in the same place. I would agree that we are projecting a world, and we are projecting the notion of time. There's no proof of it otherwise. I would quibble, I guess, with the language. We're projecting a world, there is a world. We will never know if there is a world. Never. Because we only have the colors that happen in our eyeballs and the sensations in our fingertips. We will never experience a world without ourselves as the filter through which it's experienced. So if there's a world, we're never going to know it. But I guess I would also ask you, why do you care about time?
That's a good question. I find it actually helps me stay present when I remind myself, like, time isn't actually possible. Then it's like kind of all I'm left with is, yeah, whatever's right here in front of me. So yeah, it's actually just a useful device, but I was kind of curious your guys' take on it. Yeah.
So I think that's as a way to bring yourself out of fantasizing about a future or a past, because there's tons of research that shows that what we call memories are just flashes of images that happen right now. We connect the dots and we say this happened. It's almost always inaccurate.
Mm-hmm.
And so when if as a device, the idea that there's only now or some version of that helps you stop hallucinating for a minute, yay.
Yeah, and even now, like the term "be present." Well, present assumes time.
Yes.
So yeah, it's like it can't even be present. It's just there's just this.
Exactly, because it also assumes there's an alternative.
Yeah, yeah. Like how can I not be present?
How would that work? Yeah.
Yeah. Great.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Marco.
Hello. Finally get to talk to Judy and Robert.
You're on.
Okay, so here's the question. I would say that my deepest fear, and I think this is true for a lot of other people, is that there's some deep worry that something is wrong with life. It's not good to exist. There's something wrong with this whole thing, and that you just can't ever find a place of safety or trust or goodness that lasts. There's just this sort of frightening feeling of mystery that's like wants to swallow us up. And it's just hard to find a sense to be able to trust, just letting whatever this self is go. Even though, I mean, anyway, so I guess my question is, are you both, one of you, pro-existence? I mean, if you were some kind of alien being, would you say, go ahead, be human, it's worth it. You get to live, you get to die, you get to do all kinds of crazy stuff. And you really get to die, not pretend, for real. So are you pro-existence, pro-human? Is it worth it? Is there some goodness at the root of all this? Seems to me like a wild, reckless, ruthless goodness or love. It sure ain't sweet.
Robert,
So,
will you permit me to jump in here? I hear some version of this all my working day.
good. I don't feel special anymore.
No. Okay. So, are you pro-existence? What an interesting way to put it. What's the alternative?
I don't know, some other type of existence where you don't have a body and you imagine things and they come into being, and then you imagine something else.
Well, if you
It's
don't
sort
have
of
a body, what does the imagining?
I don't know.
So where I would go with this, if you and I were playing together online, and I actually would invite you to take advantage of my free session business so we could really do this directly for you, okay?
Yeah.
But when you say something is wrong, I got to tell you, this is the experience in some version of most of the people on this planet. This is how the mind creates a sense of existence with this something is wrong business. So it's not good to exist. And I think what you're telling me is that life is not feeling much fun these days. Yes?
It's more complicated than that. It feels like more that I'm frightened of the elusive, mysterious quality that seems to be in the background.
Okay.
Or in the foreground or whatever. I'm like scared to really trust and be intimate with life.
Okay. And so I have a favor to ask you, because I had a concussion 2 years ago and all the moving around, it's hard for me to look at you.
Stopping.
Thank you so much. Otherwise I would just not look. So I just want to explain. All right. So whether you trust it or not, is life happening?
Yes.
It doesn't need your trust.
Nope.
That's good to know. It
doesn't care, I guess. Doesn't care, doesn't need it.
Okay. So I guess, this is hard to do. I don't want to do a whole session.
Yeah.
But I would love it if you would use one of the buttons on my website, assuming you're not in Australia, and take advantage of that session, and we can play with that. But I would just say to you, just this second, right now, I'm not asking you for what it feels like. That's a trick of the mind, what things feel like. This second, are you okay? Yes or no?
Go with yes.
Okay, so try it without the I'll go with, just to see if it feels different to you. In this second, are you okay?
Yes.
Okay. Does that feel any different? Do you feel
Yeah,
hedging your bets? Yes.
A little lighter.
Okay. And how about this second? You okay?
Yeah.
Okay, there's 2 whole seconds where you don't have to trust that life isn't going to reach out and get you. Right? I'm just saying it doesn't, maybe So you're moving again. I'm just not going to look, okay? Because I can't, my head can't hack it. Sorry. So maybe there's more peace and goodness to life that is actually already happening for you than you're noticing, because you're focusing on whether you can trust it or not. Maybe it's already, because how about this second? Are you okay?
Yes.
That's 3. Okay.
Okay, so but the question I have for you, Judy and Robert, is what is your just like this the very most ordinary basic sense of being? Do you have a sense that there's some goodness or love or richness in it? I mean, just the like when you're not thinking, you just feel like what's it like to be alive? Is it? Do you have a sense that it's okay and there's some goodness in it or love?
I would answer that with a yes, but I can see the temptation for anybody to turn that into a religion and a gospel, and I really wouldn't want to be part of that. But
yeah, turn into a great big thing.
If I, again, without getting too dogmatic or spiritual about it, if I feel into, if there is no self, and we're just being logical now and intellectual for a minute, if there is no self, then what is there? And if I feel into that a little bit, it's kind. That's my experience. That doesn't mean that's your experience. And I don't know what Robert would say.
Well, I would, I think, refer us to the old joke. I think Woody Allen is the one who came up with this. At least that's where I heard it. He said, life is miserable. It's filled with pain and fear, and it's over way too soon.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like a very kind experience of being, Robert. Sounds like you're a little, there's some, I guess part of me just wants to say, a great deal of being human is painful and disappointing and frustrating. Mm-hmm. And I don't know.
Well, let me comment on that, because what is the alternative?
I don't have one.
I don't think anybody else does either. I mean, this is the way that I do this psychologically, is that there's a balance between eros on the one hand and thanatos on the other. Eros being the erotic desire for sex and for gardening, planting flowers. That's the erotic end. And the thanatos end is death, and it's warfare and inventing bombs and everything. This is the human mind. It contains all of that. And each one of us finds oneself somewhere on a spectrum between eros and thanatos. If it gets down to the thanatos end, you might actually commit suicide. People do. I mean, that's a philosophical question. That's what Camus said. Albert Camus said the one true philosophical question is suicide or not. Or he would say, and then in a lighter vein, he would joke. He would say things like, well, should I have a cup of coffee or should I kill myself? And he meant to joke. Okay, well, so if you want to approach life, and that's the question, okay, that's part of it. I wouldn't deny it.
So I would just say, because I'm realizing as you're speaking, Marco, that some of the posts you've made on my page, that I thought you were joking. I understand now that you were not. And
no, I was both.
I understand. Yeah. But I would really say that there is a way that, sorry, Robert?
I'm sorry. I wanted to say this. If I had known that you two were already communicating about this, I would have stayed out of it.
Oh, no problem. We're having a dialogue. or a trilogue, or whatever. But I would say, though, that there is a way that the mind can keep a person from noticing sweetness. And you've said some things that tell me that is happening for you. So it's not only that you have to either make do with misery or kill yourself. There is, you know, we could pull a little at those threads that loosen the sweater a little bit. I hope you'll reach out to me.
Well, I think I will.
It'll take that long, actually.
Yeah, we'll see. My last comment, though, just as an ironic thing here, and I'll stop, is that this whole sense of, you know, idealizing a teacher, and then you feel devastated when you see that they're how imperfect they are. I mean, that's like a super powerful life gift to like get betrayed and devastated like that. Maybe that's what you should do, is let people put you on a pedestal so that they can see you fall off and feel devastated and betrayed and see how naive they are, giving away their power.
It's a thought. It just doesn't sit well with me.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
you know, it was a gift for me, for sure, but I can't.
You can't, it's not you. All right. Well, I think I will hook up with you on the
I hope so.
20-minute thing.
I hope so.
Thank you. I love you both. Thank you.
Back at you.
Thank you. Thank you. Great, Judy. I guess we're open to more questions or comments. I don't see any hands up. Do you, Judy?
I think I see Dave Zuckerman.
Yeah, I want to just interject something on the time aspect. You know, Einstein said that time is an illusion. And I agree, because all, you know, you look at when Robert had turned me on to the book by George Godot, it got down to a point where it talked about the Sumerian civilization in a brief passage, and I did some research on it and found out that the Sumerian civilization is credited. You know, I've always looked at it very simply, and I cannot find anybody that can really, time is really doesn't exist. It's only dimensionalized in the mind. It's a linear aspect, but the present moment is completely vertical.
I just want to say one thing, and I do see there's a question about this too. I want to say that time is an illusion. There's no indication of there's no proof that it exists. The now is an illusion. There's no proof that exists. And really, what isn't an illusion?
Is our present an illusion?
Well, is it? Can you prove it?
I can prove it through my existence. I know I exist.
Okay, I know I exist. What are you using for that knowing?
Presence.
Do you see the circularity of that reasoning?
Well, presence is a
You're
given.
using presence, well, not to me. So you're using presence to prove presence. That's a circle.
You can't prove, but you can't prove, you cannot disprove presence because of existence, because you know you exist.
Okay, so that was gibberish in my opinion. So I'll just say
that was diversion.
No, this is what you have to resort to, what one has to resort to when you just consider with a lightly open mind, is all I'm throwing out there, that possibly it's all illusion, including what you're calling presence. And if it's considered, just considered, you might land someplace new.
Well, I don't think presence is solid. In other words, I'm not, when I use
No,
the word,
I'm following Robert's lead here, Dave. I know I'm interrupting you. I'm not offering this as an opportunity to have a conversation about it. I'm just saying it's all an illusion, possibly. And if that's the case, maybe you end up someplace else than where your dogma keeps you right now. Because presence can be a dogma.
can be a what?
A dogma, a religion, something set in stone that isn't actually set in stone. I'm just saying it's something to consider.
I want to intervene here, Judy, because David and I have a long history. He's a friend on Facebook. We've had this conversation a million times. Years ago, I started calling him the now man because
I would understand that.
well, he's a one-trick pony, and I love him, but I don't want to have this conversation be about whether now exists or not. It's a waste of our time, in my opinion.
Great.
So
Unfortunately, that wasn't where I was going, but I'll just drop it.
David, there's no offense required, but we're not going to discuss that topic at this meeting. We're just not going to. It's a topic for when you have
All good.
a few
All
beers,
good.
and a lot of time to kill. Then you can have that conversation. But here,
30 years sober, I don't think I'm going to drink a beer, but thanks.
our time is limited. So what I want to do is give the next person a chance to interact with Judy.
These kinds of conversations tend to gather like-minded people. But I'll just ask, just in case, is there anybody who's taken offense to something I've said or disagreed with something I've said, or anybody want to set me straight about something?
Beautiful. That's beautiful. Good. What a good question. That's great.
But it seems not. We're going to have, next time, if we ever do this again, Robert, we'll have to go to Rick Archer's forum and gather attendees there.
Or else
So
you could send me a nasty message and I'll reply in a nasty way, and then we'll have a whole controversy going on. That actually happened to me when the last book came out. Someone wrote a scathing review of it, and 1 stars, and this is trash and garbage. And then this whole thing somehow got played out on Facebook and became a college celeb and everything. It's just amazing.
oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, people may have thought that your self needed protecting.
So I like your approach to pointing out when me and myself becomes the topic of conversation, regardless of what the ostensible topic of conversation is. I think that's quite brilliant, and I'm glad you said it. It's great.
Thank you.
And that's so.
I am of that school that suffering comes from the reification of self, the making this sense of self solid. And so, you know, anything that holds it in place hurts in one level or another. And that's essentially one of my doorways in.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. I've said the same thing in writing many times. It's in both of my books. So it's not a question of erasing that, in my view, but just calling it into question all the time. And then
Right.
that will loosen the lacings. And then if the boot comes off, it does. And if it doesn't,
Right.
okay too. You don't have to
Right.
accomplish anything, really. Just notice that what you're calling myself is problematical. We don't really know what it is. And it doesn't seem to last, even though you would want to. Like, think of a time when everything's been really great and you would want that to last, but it didn't. It can't. Things are constantly shifting all the time from moment. And I think the thing that I call awake is not that things shift from month to month or week to week or day to day, but things shift from second to second. And it's like falling through space. If you really notice it, there's no stop to it. There's no landing zone. And so if we imagine that there's a landing zone, and we call that whatever the guru said it was, or whatever. I've forgotten your person you got involved with, Judy. That,
Oh, Byron Katie.
oh yeah,
Byron Katie. Yeah.
yeah, Byron Katie. Someone mentioned Byron Katie to me last year. I'd never really heard. I'd heard of the Byron Katie work, but I didn't know what it was. So I looked it up, and I just thought, this is nonsense, man. This is just so mental. It's amazing. You can't really talk yourself out of your feelings so easily. Please, it doesn't work that way.
It can reroute perception. It can do that, and you can.
That's how all these methods work. If someone is really dizzy and confused, and their head is spinning, which when I did therapy, a lot of people, when they first came into my office, their heads were spinning. I mean, they were not okay. They weren't here. So you have to get the head to stop spinning. So first, so if you tell someone, sit here and gaze at the candle and meditate, that might be great. Except if you keep doing that, you'll become hypnotized. So all of these methods, in my view, are just a way to slow down and get off the trip for a moment. And maybe in that moment, you'll notice that you're really here. Before all the things you think and worry about, there's something prior to that. And it's not like it's in outer space someplace. That is you. It's you as much as anything is you.
Right.
It's part of you. We all have it. In my experience, we all have it. And when I meet someone, I see it mostly in people when it's invisible to them. That's the thing that's so surprising. When I'm speaking with other people, I see that they're really awake, except they don't see that they're really awake. So,
right.
Yes,
right.
I think we're all in the same boat in a way when it comes to consciousness. We all have a moment here and there when we actually notice that we're here. Hey, I'm here. So I think what happens is, for some people, that just becomes a prolonged experience. It just keeps recurring. You keep noticing yourself, and that's what I mean by awake.
I think we end up in a similar place, but again, I go at it really differently, because for me, and this is one of the things that I say that pisses off all the fundamentalist spiritual people. For me, you keep noticing yourself, reifies the self. And
I got that. I got that earlier.
Yeah.
So yeah. I think this is really a language thing. I just find myself, I take this for granted. I have no other way to speak. So I just speak from my own experience. And for me, it's okay to use the word I. I'm not reifying anything when I do that. I'm clear.
Yeah, I'm just saying when people are trying to expand beyond the noticing of self, and they're seeking, they want to see through the self. This is an expression used often, but they're doing it via the self. So they don't see that you can't do it. You can't.
Yeah, I got that. That's the paradox. If you trying will just reinforce the sense of self. Trying to get out of it means there's an I who has to try. But see, the I that I'm speaking about, there is an I say. A sense of I-ness exists. There's no point in denying it or trying to get out of it. This is just my view. I'm not trying to sell this to anyone. I'm only speaking about this personal confession. That I never is just what it thinks it is. And it never knows just what it thinks it knows. And so it's really unstable. And you see, there's a lot of fear in having an unstable sense of myself. We're encouraged quite the opposite from childhood, is to firm that up and, be a mensch. But Yes, and this is okay. I mean, we do need some of this to survive in the world, of course. But when you apply that to your own real need, emotional needs, you really stymie yourself. It can't. One last word on this: there's a fad now among the woke people to vilify maleness, and they say, "Oh, they're all this violence, and they're all hung up, and they don't see their feelings." This is not seeing your feelings as human. It's not that women see their feelings that accurately either. In my opinion,
Right.
they're just freer to express them, socially freer. But that doesn't mean that they're seeing. It
Right.
doesn't mean. Yeah, okay, I've spoken.
Oh no, that's right. I haven't seen that male-female thing. I have not encountered that. That's that'll be fun when I do.
Say it again.
I have not come across that male-female thing that you're describing. I have not seen that. I will say.
I'm not sure what you mean.
Okay, but I might have misheard you. I thought you were saying there's a maleness, there's a focus on maleness, vilifying maleness.
What I'm saying now is that the human male, especially the light-skinned human male, is now expected to apologize for it
I see.
being what it is, which is amazing. I mean, this is a form of sanctioned violence. And it's amazing to me that everyone wants to get behind that idea. I think it's nutso. Just take the opportunity to say that because you're here, and I'd like to hear how you see that.
I think that whatever, whether we are white male or brown male or white female or yellow female or whatever, I think that we are limited by the identity, limited by the attempt to continually prove what we are and what we aren't.
Beautiful. Right, beautiful. So it's the identification that's being forced upon us, if I'm understanding you. Is that?
And we're accepting it. We go with it. We agree. But yes.
Okay, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for that. See, I'm going to say this. What I see in Judy is what I call an open mind. Not that she doesn't have her way of seeing the world, as she was saying, we're all seeing the world through filters. Some of us know that and some don't. If you know it, might be a little easier to deal with all this, maybe. But it's okay to have ideas, but it's good to see that they're quite limited and that it can get in your way as much as they can help you. If you become fixated on them in any way, then you're stuck. Then you're always having something to defend and debate and prove to. And this is what Judy was saying before about demonstrating that I really exist, right? That's the idea, Judy, am I right?
Yes. Yes, and for me, doing the work that I do and encounter, and even if I didn't do this work, people are everywhere. People are hurting in one degree or another. Life is hard, as Markle said, and this experience is difficult. And so, if we truly don't want to hurt, we need to do something different, and that requires an open mind. Otherwise, we're locked in to what we've always been doing, and there's no option but pain. Yeah. This is, by the way, this kind of statement is what the folks on Rick Archer's forum were psychoanalyzing me about, that I apparently live in a world of great pain. So, so I've just given them more ammunition to psychoanalyze me, I would imagine.
Okay, at this point, I want to. We've been at this for quite a while now. I'm enjoying it, but if there aren't more questions, we might think about approaching ending.
I think that sounds like a good plan. It is so fun to see some of you on this screen, I gotta say. Some of you I haven't seen in a really long time, so I love seeing you.
Yeah, it's been fun. Well, Judy, I've really enjoyed speaking with you very much. I like hearing your
Me
ideas.
too, Robert.
Um, very sweet to share this. Before I call the meeting to an end, I just wonder if there's anyone who needs to speak or wants to speak.
Just, just for this moment, Robert, and I know you've spoke about adulation and all of that. I just have to get this across because I've read your books, Robert, and I see none of that in your book, none of it, and no coming across as this authority figure saying you should do this or do that, and this is how you do it, or giving no answers. And I just have to say that your books have totally blown the cobwebs away for me. Can you hear me, by the way?
I hear you.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Really loud and clear, and thank you very much. Those are very sweet words for an author to hear.
It was like actually opening the gate of a garden, walking in and smelling the roses and breathing in the fresh air.
I may have to hire you to be my publicist.
Oh, please do. I'm unemployed.
Yeah, at least write a good review for Amazon or something, because
I will do. Yes.
it's so much fun to, this is what I was getting at earlier in the meeting, although my internet connection now is okay, but at that time, I don't know. It's been so much fun the last 2 or 3 years since the 2 books have come out. It's been really beautiful. There's a lot of people I'm meeting now who are really lovely and interested in these ideas. And it's like I'm having a flowering that I'm enjoying. And, you know, this meeting is part of that, Wendy. So thank you for being here and being a
It's beautiful.
I really appreciate it.
And I love what you said, Judy, on the back gap as well. I did listen to that, and I did feel the same, that Rick Archer didn't really get you. But I think it's a case of the ball is thrown and either somebody catches it or they don't. In my opinion, that's my opinion. But I did like what you had to say, and I loved what you said about your experience cannot be repeated. Yours, I'm saying. I'm sure there's lots on here that have had experiences. I have too, and it's unique to me, my world. And I appreciated that you didn't really talk about that much as well.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
So I just wanted to tell you both thank you so much. And I've done a little bit of work with Judy, which has been awesome. And Robert, I've had some interaction with you on Facebook and that kind of thing. But anyway, it's been awesome. And I love both of your styles. And this has been really great today. I was really excited to be here. And I hate talking in front of people, but that's just a me thing, I guess. Worried about myself, you know, but anyway, doesn't matter. But one quick question, and I don't mean to drag this on, but I would be curious to know each of your viewpoint on counseling and like a person, you know, getting counseling for something they're going through in their life. Just because you've both been in that role before, and you know, life can be so difficult sometimes. And I also know that counseling kind of has a bad rap, and it has kind of gotten one for me too. So I just was curious what you both thought of, you know, a person pursuing talking to somebody about their problems and trying to work through things. I know that can kind of like focus on the problems, and it's just talking therapy, which can maybe not be very helpful sometimes. So just curious what you thought.
So here's my sense on that. First of all, I'm sure many will disagree with me on this. I think for me, too much time or much time spent on what has already happened in the past, I think that has limited value myself. if you're talking about counseling for somebody to have somebody to talk to, I mean, who doesn't enjoy that? If we're talking about counseling as a way to validate oneself, there's nothing wrong with it. I'm not sure about, I'm not sure if people can get what they want that way. That being said, of course, there's nothing wrong with it. And if it makes people feel better, I say go for it. You know, but I don't know. I think that if it makes people feel better part is a big if, I think. Does that answer surprise you, Robert?
You know, it's very hard to generalize, because if you get a good therapist, that could be a miracle. Somebody who really can, may not, you know, you mentioned talking about the past and how that could be less than optimal use of the time, let's put it that way. That could be true, or it might not. I mean, someone might need to speak about some traumatic event for a year or two, and then, so, I mean, that I did some long-term therapies with some people who had been very deeply injured, and it might take a while. So I don't do that anymore. I'm more like just an instantaneous hit, and you get it or you don't. So I'm not really doing the therapy. But if you get a bad therapist, you can end up a lot worse off. It's like back surgery or something. You get a good surgeon who does the job right, you're great. Otherwise, you might end up a lot worse off than you were before you had the surgery. And that's kind of scary, because it's hard to evaluate. So that's why people are moving away, I think, from therapy and more into self-help approaches. But if you have something in your life and it's really difficult to cope, I think therapy is probably a good approach. And
so I would just toss in here that this is something that, this is a point of view about this particular subject that many people disagree with me about. Would not just be us, many people disagree with me that when we love to go on about our story. We love to talk about it. We love to sit with it. We love to explain what happened. We love our stories. And for me, there is a limited value in allowing that song to be sung indefinitely.
Correct.
That's my weird opinion.
Oh, I don't think that's weird at all, Judy. We're probably just discussing how much time is endless. I mean, how much time is too much time. We may disagree,
right.
But all I meant to say was not that someone should go on talking about some trauma for 10 years or something. That's not the idea. But it's like mourning. It's like mourning a death. Some people can get over it pretty quick, and it's not that they don't care. They may care just as much as the person who grieves for 5 years, but they were just able to get through that. A traditional time, I think, is 1 year. People say you have a year to really grieve that, and then you're supposed to kind of snap to it. But a lot of that is really cultural, because there are cultures on Earth where there's 5 years of grieving and wearing black. So I think that therapy is good when it's about the individual and there's no cookie cutter approach to any of it. And I think there aren't a lot of therapists, although there are many, but there a smaller proportion are willing to actually enter into that with someone. More of them want to have a treatment protocol, and they just lay that out in the way that they do. I think what I hear in Judy's work is that she engages people right where they are, and takes their words in the present and deconstructs them in a certain way. And I think that's a wonderful approach. It's beautiful. But it takes someone who's really committed and listens to everything that's being said. Otherwise, you have to really care. Otherwise, you can't do it. Am I right?
That is absolutely true. yes, it takes a lot of attention. And I've been like in our conversations, because this is just autopilot for me, I just do it without even thinking. But I've been writing down your words or Markle's words, or so that I can enter via that language. But I guess, and I also just want to say that when I'm working with people in a counseling situation, that in my odd, granted, unusual approach, my feeling is that if people want to be heard and they want their story told, they don't want me, because I am going to take them someplace else. And so if they're attached to the story, I'm not the person for them. And I will interrupt that song frequently, which pisses people off. So does that answer your question, Lori? Okay. Krista has her hand up.
Yes. So this has been such enlivening and delightful discussion. I have enjoyed it entirely. So my professional background is I'm a physical therapist and a lymphedema therapist. So in that profession, I work in oncology and chronic pain. And then I'm also a yoga therapist. So I deal a lot with people who are in story. And so also being a dancer, I'm the dancer. Can you comment, either one of you or both of you, on movement therapies and kind of getting, from your perspective, getting people out of their story?
I don't know enough about it. I know it's out there, and I think anything that reroutes, yay. And if movement can do that, great. I think the sensory sensation can do that. Just perceiving in a different way. If movement does that, great. I just don't know enough. I wouldn't be able to do it because it's alien to me. So I have to work through language and the mind and people's daily situations. But if that works, you know, yay. Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on that, Robert?
Oh, well, when you say get someone out of their story, then the way I hear that is that there's something about the story that's kind of sick. And maybe it's some attachment to the way things should have been, or why is this happening to me? Is that the kind of thing you mean, Krista?
Yeah, so a lot of times I find that people are either in rehearsing for the future or rehashing the past. And I use breath a lot and movement as a yoga therapist and also a physical therapist to sort of help them reconnect with their body, to bring them out of their pain or out of their mind, because that's where they tend to sit, or that's where they tend to be.
Yeah.
So
well,
you're describing a form of meditation. You know, I mean, this is what for some people that is their meditation. That's, you know,
Yes.
bring the attention to the breath and etc.
body.
It's a form of presence or noticing presence. And again, yay, if it works for them. Your thought, Robert, I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, not a problem. So the kind of story you're talking about getting out of is this kind of self-defeating, repetitious, poor, pitiful me story, or whatever. It's feeling sorry for oneself. Is that the idea, Krista? That's what I'm trying to think.
Yeah, so things like, oh, I used to be able to do this, and I'll be able to do that in the future. I'm, you know, the same things as I'm not good enough. You know, all that stuff about I, which Judy has been talking about. And
so my feeling about this is that the particular kind of therapeutic approach is not paramount, but the intention of the therapist is very important. So, I mean, I had a lot of physical therapy after my accident, broke my back. And I'm working with a massage therapist twice a week now. And we have these conversations while she's working on me. And some of them have some very sage advice from her embodied into them. So I don't know whether the best thing is that we're in contact and she has her hands on my body and is touching me in ways that are sometimes painful, but also can feel very pleasant. And she's talking. Some of the things that she said were really great. Like, I'll tell you one that seems counterintuitive, but I loved it. She said, "It's okay to be old, Robert." That really helped. Now, that really fucking helped me. I've got to tell you, it was one of the best things I heard for a long time. She was telling me, you don't really need to 100% heal this. You just need to be okay. And she was so right. That's very
Great.
Now, so it's the intention, it's what you bring to the work. And if I'm still not hearing you, my internet connection's bad right now.
No, he's just unmuted now. Go ahead.
I think I'm unmuted, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm a long-time practitioner of traditional Tai Chi, studied for several decades, taught. And so Tai Chi can be a movement, a flow that provides some temporary meditative quality, some temporary relief to one's anxiety at the moment. But it's been my experience working with a lot of people that it's just a temporary experience. There's a lot of very accomplished Tai Chi practitioners that outside of the world of Tai Chi, they don't exude much understanding or wisdom, a lot of neuroses, a lot of issues. And it seems like the deep work that we're talking about today, the understanding of the nature of one's mind and life, the nature of one's story, the nature of the suffering that is possible and all that, it doesn't get relieved so much through the movement. It's been my experience, it's just some temporary relief. I've studied with some very Chinese Tai Chi masters, and outside of the world of Tai Chi, they're just as neurotic and perhaps belligerent as anybody.
I have a question for you, Howard. Since you have that Tai Chi technology and can use it presumably whenever you like, but it's not effective in the lasting sense, have you found anything that is effective in a lasting sense?
Yes, one is the exploration and the inquiry with people like you and Judy and others on this site, on how that initiates reflection, and also meditation. Meditation in the sense of not so much trying to attain a meditative state to finally get to enlightenment, but meditation in a sense of it sensitizes my whole organism, my body and my mind, and that allows me to learn more at the deeper levels when I have that sensitive quality that meditation allows to happen more easily. Because the world moves so fast, everything's moving so fast, and sitting down quietly allows me to see things a little more clear.
Mm-hmm. You want to comment, Judy?
It's a big subject, and we have been on the line a long time. I think anything that corrals the mind, like wrangles it, sends a lasso out and says, no, no, come back. No, no, come back. No, no, come back, which is what so often people experience in meditation. You know, they sit and the mind wanders and they bring it back, and they sit and the mind wanders and they bring it back. But I think anything that does that is a worthy exercise. And I think if people are lucky, and I don't know how many are, it can leak and pervade and seep into the rest of your life. But I don't know how often that happens. I know how often it's claimed to happen, but I'm not sure I don't know how often it actually does. But yeah, it's anything that enters in a different way is a great thing. So that we're not just slaves to the daily, what'll I do tomorrow and what happened to me yesterday was awful kind of life. If that answers your question.
Anything further?
I think we should ask Amy if her dog has any questions. So cute.
Yes, Rafiki, what do you have to say? Thank you so much. Really enjoyed listening.
Hi, Amy. How are you doing? Amy, a friend right here in Los Santos. And that's her new pup.
Oh, sweet. What a beautiful little thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess we are going to end this, Judy. It's just been a downright pleasure. It truly has.
And back at you, same.
Great, Judy, and I'm sure we'll be in touch soon.
I hope so. Great seeing you guys, really. Loved it.
Yeah, love to you all.